just a little bit of time, but it just feels like yesterday that I was the age of most of the people I'm looking at in the room. Time goes so fast. So if I can say nothing else, appreciate the time that you have with the people that you have, because like I said, time goes so fast. And before you know it, you're my age and older. So tonight I'm going to talk about forgiveness, but really, when I say the word forgiveness, it's more about unforgiveness, because that's what really gets us into trouble. Unforgiveness is one of my weaknesses. So when Devin asked me to talk and come up with a topic, I'm like, oh, that's easy. I'm going to talk about something that I struggled with for years, and sometimes still do. Unforgiveness can be such a big weakness, and I think Satan uses it against us all the time in so many different ways. The first time you really experience any unforgiveness is in our childhood with our siblings, right? How many of you have wrestled that other sibling, or just, thrown things at the other one, banged doors, words fly? Ours was always the doors. The bedroom doors would slam, and So it starts back in childhood, and that's where we learn. We have these relationships, and we have unforgiveness. It's the first time. Then we go to school. Well, there's a second place. Now you're meeting with people that you have no idea who they are. And there's some nice, and there's some not so nice. My first grade year experience, I had some not so great girls that I hung with. I remember the first day of second grade, and I was looking up at our names that were hanging up above our seats, and I'm like, here's not a new name I don't know. I'm going to be friends with her, because I am not going to be with those girls in first grade that I was with. And she was a great friend for several years. But that's where the unforgiveness, or where you experience confrontation and things, all those feelings that you don't like, and you're learning to grow, and you're experiencing that. Bullies was my next thing. I love bullies. So when I was growing up, if you were a bully, and most of the time growing up, no offense guys, but it was the guys that tended to be the bullies. Well, girls were mean, but guys were bullies. There was a boy that bullied my brother. My brother's 2 years younger than me. I grew up on a farm, so I knew how to get around animals, and I had a little bit of upper strength to me. And the day that he bullied my brother was probably the umpteenth time. And off I went. It was my first physical fight. I was in the 5th grade. And my dad and his dad had to pull us away from each other. It was the first time that I experienced really severe unforgiveness. How could you do that to my brother? Poor guy. He wasn't doing anything. And yet, that was one of the first times that I experienced that. We got over it. We make up. We get along really well now. We laugh about it now, because we're obviously adults. But that was my first experience with that. So that laid the groundwork. Well, then high school comes. Okay, now everybody, I'm assuming, not far behind, was high school. Again, girls can be so mean. Guys can be guys. And that's how I'll say that. One of my worst experiences with guys in high school, I had dated a guy, and we had broke up after 8 or 9 months. Well, I had met who is now my future, my husband now, but I had met Ken, and we were going out. Well, my previous boyfriend put out there that we had slept together. I am from a good Catholic upbringing, and that was the last thing that I wanted out there, and it certainly wasn't the truth. It was bad enough that it was the truth. That would have been hard to deal with, but it was not the truth. Again, unforgiveness towards the gentleman. I explained everything to Ken profusely, and he, of course, we continued to date and got married, and so that part, yay, happily ever after. But again, that unforgiveness was there. But the biggest unforgiveness, the area that Satan really planted a seed in my heart and took over. I mean, he's going to try all different areas of your life, right? Because if he can take you down, if he can take any way he can, he's he's going to use that for him against God. I was the oldest of 9 kids. I still am. But when I was going out, it was a big deal for us to be home on time. If I was 5 minutes late, or if I was an hour late, I got the same punishment. It usually was a month, grounded, or 2 weeks out in the barn milking cows. Usually you got your choice. So, but I was a debater. I was like, how can the 5 minutes be the same punishment as an hour? And in my mind, in my teenage mind, there was a big difference. But in my dad's parental mind, I broke the rules, period. So it really didn't matter to him which way it was. But in that instance, that's where the seed was planted. Bitterness came in, anger, and unfortunately, it grew into hatred. Now, hatred can consume you. It gets a pit in the middle of your stomach. It becomes all you think about. And it's a door. It's an opening to evil. I didn't realize I was opening that door. I didn't realize that I was allowing it to happen. Because of course, this was his fault, right? You know, as that young teenager, young daughter, it was all his fault, it wasn't mine. He was the one that was being unreasonable. But I let Satan in. Fast forward, Ken and I get married. We're ready to start a family. We could not have kids. I am infertile. Okay, heartbreak again. I'm mad. I'm upset. I can't believe this is where my path in life is going through. And I'm stuck with myself. Now, I don't know if any of you remember or have seen pictures, because you probably don't remember, but in the 80s, there was a thing called white walls on cars, your wheels. They had the light, nice white stripe around them. My husband had a car that he loved, and we cleaned those darn white walls every week. Well, so I'm out there helping him. I'm not doing it right. For whatever reason, it doesn't look near as good as his white walls, and I'm probably doing it backwards because I'm left-handed, so the whole world looks backwards to me. So he comes over to check out my white walls, and they're not up to his standards. And then a disagreement, quite a disagreement, argument ensues. It's probably one of the biggest fights Ken and I had to date. Actually, it probably really wasn't about the white walls. It was probably about all the other stuff happening in their life at that time. But at that moment, it was the white walls. So we went to bed again in anger, upset, which you're not supposed to go to bed in anger when you're married. Just that way, that's a freebie. But we went to bed upset with each other. Well, that particular night, I had a dream. Now, everyone in here dreams, but there are some dreams that you have that are so real, it's like you are just reliving it in the daytime. So here I am in the driveway again, and we're doing those darn white walls. And I'm cleaning them. Only this time, instead of cleaning them with Ken, I'm cleaning with Jesus. He's on the other side. And I want to do a really good job this time, which I probably should have wanted to do a really good job with Ken. Let's just call it what it is. But I want to do a really good job because if Jesus is helping me, I don't want him to look at my white walls and not be good. The car disappears. I'm standing on one side. Where the car was, Jesus is standing on the other side. So we're like 10 feet away from each other. In that moment, I leave my body, and I'm standing by Jesus. And I'm looking at me. That's across the driveway where I was. And what I saw was not pretty. I don't know if any of you have gone to horror movies. those that are filled with not so great things in horror movies, that's what I saw in myself. It was horrible. It was like I could see the evil one inside of me just living and breathing and taking over me slowly. But at this point, by that time, it had taken over a lot of me. And I look at Jesus and I look at me across the driveway. I'm like, what's going on? What's happening here? And he just looked very calmly, lovingly at me and firmly said, choose. Well, there was no other choice. And all I knew was, I choose you. And I jumped back in my body. Okay, now I'm in this body that I just saw. That looked really, really scary, and really, really ugly, and really, really full of hate and anger and all those things. And I just wanted out. So just like all those movies where you see the little girl that screams and has her arms in the air, that's what I did. You know, I bolted and I was running down the road that we lived on, and I'm just screaming, get out of me, get out of me. And I'm running. And I probably ran for a quarter of a mile down the road. And finally, I just slowly stopped. And I felt a peace. And again, this peace is beyond all human experience. And I turn around and I'm walking, again, just peacefully, walking down the road to go back to our house. But as I'm walking, I see, you know how in motion pictures, when there's a skip, and it plays something, and then it skips back, and it plays it again, and it skips back, and it plays it again? That's what I was seeing. And in those skips, I was watching myself run down the road. I could slowly see this stuff leave me as I'm running down the road. And as it's leaving, this gold light like no other is coming into me. So as it leaves, the gold light's coming into me. And I'm watching this happen as I'm walking back. Like it was just a picture show being shown over and over again. I calmly go back to my house. Car's still gone, by the way. I go into my house, I sit at my kitchen table, and Jesus sits across from me. And he said, I want to ask you if you'll consider doing something for me. Well, this moment, I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'm all, whatever you want me to do. And he said, I want you to tell your stories. And this is the first story that you'll tell. So that's why I started by talking this. He says, I have stories that you'll be able to tell in your life. Will you tell your stories? I said, yeah, I'll tell my stories. And then at that moment, in a flash, I saw all four of my kids. Mind you, I'm in Virgo. I'm not able to have kids. And I saw all four of my kids. Okay, 3 minutes. I wake up. I'm in my bed. Basically, I wake up and I'm hyperventilating because I've just done this major physical thing. I've just done this major spiritual thing on the kind of on the negative, but yet on the really, really positive. And I can't catch my breath. And my poor husband wakes up and he's thinking of having an asthma attack. I don't have asthma, but he's thinking that's what it's like. And so he runs down. He's trying to find something downstairs. Is there anything that I can spray into my mouth or whatever to help me with this? And he's probably frantic. I mean, mind you, we're pretty young, so he doesn't know. And I come back downstairs. I'm okay. I'm okay. But at that moment, I knew what I had to do. I had to finish the forgiveness. Had I forgiven my dad at that moment? Absolutely. Because he didn't get off the hook that easy. So at 2 or 3 in the morning, whatever time it was, I called my dad. And in tears, crying, I'm so sorry. Can you forgive me? Because I certainly forgive you. And of course, Dad, being much older than me in life, is Ken there? And are you okay? next month, by the way, I conceived our first son. So that just tells you. Another thing is, and during that time, as I was pregnant with our oldest, I asked, why couldn't I have a child prior to that? Now, for me, because I'm not saying this for anyone else that's infertile, but for me, it was the thing of I couldn't put something so wonderful as a child inside of someone that was carrying so much evil and so much hate. So it's real. It's really real. Like I said, that's my story. I never want to say that everybody that's infertile has that. This is what happened to me. So it's a big deal. I look at through life and things that happen. Forgiveness just has to be there. Part of that forgiveness is, it's kind of like, there are things that happen to us that are a lot smaller level than what this was. But I can remember it being explained to me once. It's like drinking a cup of poison and then expecting the other person to be affected by it. Because that's really what you're doing when you hold in anger and unforgiveness. It's affecting you. Most of the time, people that hurt you, they don't even know they hurt you, sincerely. And some people hurt you and they don't mean to. It just comes out, or they had a bad day and they said something flippant, and there you are stuck with it. But if you hold on to that, you're the one that keeps drinking that cup of poison. And they're going on their merry way, happy as can be. And now, we also know those people that hurt you, and they kind of do mean it, and they kind of don't care. But the same thing, you're the one that continually drinks that poison, and they're just fine. One of the ways that I had to learn to help forgive people, because there's going to be stuff that you say that people do. And I'm going to use the name Loretta, only because I really don't know anybody named Loretta. So I would say, I forgive Loretta, I forgive Loretta, I forgive Loretta. And I would say it sometimes 50 times just to help my mind go with my heart. I would ask Jesus, I forgive him. You're going to have to catch my heart up with what I'm saying, because I don't feel like forgiving him. I don't want to give that person a hug right now, I can tell you that. But that was one of the ways that I worked on it. Now, Ken doesn't have this problem with unforgiveness. He's actually really good at forgiving people. And I tell you, this story is, he's worked for a long time in businesses, and so there's been people that he's done business with that have been good coworkers, and there have been those that have been bad coworkers. In this situation, a long time ago, and that person doesn't work here anymore, so I'm not saying anything negative against them. But this guy was his supervisor, and Ken was supposed to receive a bonus for something that he had worked on. And included in that bonus was part of a promotion and all this stuff. Well, because this guy didn't necessarily care for Ken or felt that Ken didn't deserve it at that time, he gave it to somebody else. Ken didn't know that until a couple of years later, and then it came about, because things come about. Things don't always stay secret as much as you think they might. And he found out, well, it was to the tune of $10,000. So let's go back to the 90s. $10,000 was a lot more than $10,000 is today. Again, he forgives much better than me. We had probably at least half, if not 3/4 of our kids at that point. We could have really used that money. So we go to a dance, and that guy's there. And I see him, and we hadn't seen him for years because he had left where Ken works. And Ken goes, I'm going to talk to him. I'm like, no, don't do that, because I'm thinking this is going to be bad. He's going to go, and we're going to see this, or we're going to hear a lot of words, and I'm like, no, don't do that, Ken. And I'm right behind him, because I'm like, no, if I have to go in the middle of them, or if I have to pull him away, I'm going to do that, because I'm not going to let him do that in front of everybody at this dance. And the guy turned around and kind of went like this because he was thinking the same thing was going to happen that I thought was going to happen. And my husband goes like this and puts his hand down and says, "Hey, how you doing? Been a long time since I've seen you." And they actually had a good conversation. But it was a good lesson. It was actually a great conversation. But it was a good lesson for me. I'm thinking, how could you do that? I'm not even quite here yet. And I didn't work with him. And I'm struggling with this a little bit yet. And he, nope, put the hand out. He had let it go. He had forgiven him. He had moved on. And he said, you know what, God's going to take care of me. Well, see, he's a much better guy than I am when it comes to that sometimes. But it was true. God took care of us. God was always taking care of us. Now, the other thing that helps in those situations, pray for them. Okay? Nobody wants to pray for their enemy, right? Nobody wants to pray for the person that hurts us. Nobody wants to pray for the person that's hurt somebody in our family. But that's what we have to do. It's not what we feel like doing, but that's what we have to do. And the more you pray for them, the better. Well, it's going to get worse at first. Actually, if it gets worse at first, you know that God's working on them. Because then there's a fight for them. God's working out, helping them, and Satan's wanting to keep them. But then it will get better. Think of Joseph and his brothers. Now, talk about forgiveness. Now, here's Joseph and his brothers, and they threw him in the deep well, and he was going to be killed. And, by the grace of God, he was saved. And when they came to him, because they were starving and wanted food, he could have just diminished them. He could have dismissed them, and they couldn't have gotten anything. And it would have been deserving, because they left him for death, for dying. But he took them in, and he gave them everything that they needed. Another great example. And you're not quite Joseph, but The other thing praying for them helps with is if they're happy, don't people let you alone. If they're happy in their life, you have a better shot for them to let you alone and, quite frankly, get off your back. If they're struggling with something, that's when people are hurting. That's when they're most likely to beat you up. Now, I told you Ken's story with his work. I'm going to tell you mine. I didn't do quite as well as Ken, but here it is. We had a new supervisor come in, and we were learning a new software. The stuff that I did was a little bit different than what everyone else did. She was probably a really nice person, but she came in with a very militant way of doing things. And she didn't really train. We had other people that did that, but training was not her forte. In my experience, training is my forte. I trained for 15 years, and I also taught CCD. Doesn't hold a candle to you teachers out there, but at least I taught CCD. I was in front of students, and I taught. So there was a lot of people that weren't catching on to the software. It's new. It's different. But because she was militant about it, she would basically scream at them. And here's these young girls, and they're crying, and I'm like, one day we had a conversation, you can't do that. She goes, oh yes, I can, and I am. And if they can't take it, they can leave. And that was her way of doing things. Obviously, I didn't agree. And we were like this far apart from each other at one point, discussing loudly how we felt about that situation. But at that moment, I had challenged her, and that was my mistake, because I challenged her about how she was doing things. So I have to take responsibility a little bit on how I handled it, because I probably didn't do it the best way that could be handled. But from that moment on, she had a vendetta against me. She was going to get rid of me. And it was very obvious. So one day I get pulled in, and I have a folder, and there were 7 things that I did wrong, according to this folder. And so that was enough to put me on probation. So when we went through the 7 things, I'm like, well, do I get the opportunity to look at these and see what I did wrong and see what I'm missing out on, or if there's something that needs to be, I need to learn? So we went through them. Oh, this isn't mine. This one's not. mine either. Well, that's not mine. So in the end, 1 out of those 7 ended up being mine. And when I approached her, she said, well, you should have checked to make sure they were correct. I'm not a supervisor, so that really isn't how we work at my industry. But that's all she could think of to say. So at that moment, I could see where we were in this relationship. So I prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed for her. And most of the time, I just stayed out of her way because she really did not want to see me. We didn't have much conversations, but at least I smiled at her when I saw her, and I tried to be as Christian as I could to her. And I can tell you now, she's not working where I work at now any longer. But when I see her now, we actually do smile and have at least small talk conversation. She was ill, I found out in the last year, and I was genuinely upset about her illness. And I thought, you've let me forgive her. I really, really gave her. Because I was upset. Is there anything I can do? Can I help bring food to her? And I genuinely cared. Believe me, that's not me normally. But I actually cared. So I knew. And that's all in Jesus. That's not on me. I may have said, I forgive her under my breath all day long. I may have just walked in, sat in my chair, did my job, and then left. But I actually cared about her. And that I give credit to Jesus, because that did not happen. That is not my nature. Praise God. Full circle, one of my daughters is growing up, and she's told she's never going to have kids. So she comes home and, of course, sobs. She's dating, who's now her husband, but they're dating. And I told her, you have to tell him. You have to tell him. In fairness to him, he needs to know that you're not going to be able to have kids. And then see where it goes. So she does. She tells him. What a lovely, wonderful man he is. Because, of course, it didn't make any difference to him. He says, it's okay. When we get married, we'll just adopt. We know it ahead of time. And we'll make it work. It was probably about 4 to 6 months later. And she comes home and she tells me she has chosen life. Now, when I say that, it's because there was a little anger in her. At that point, what the heck? I can't have kids. But the doctors aren't in charge. So she tells me that she chose life. And of course, they were already secretly engaged. She goes to have a beautiful baby girl. And they get married. When we get this wrong, we be in trouble. 10 months after she's born. But she faced a lot of backlash for that. Now, as a mother, and as a Catholic mother, first of all, I tear up because I'm like, you can have kids. That's the first thing that came down. Ken's reaction was just a little bit different. But we're all good. And I told her, okay, you messed up. There's sin involved here. So I'm going to ask you, as a mother, I want you to go to confession, not only to confession, but I want you to go to divine mercy confession. Because if we all know what that is, that's where you get the plenary indulgence and all reparation for sins. I'm like, okay, because we can take care of this. There's a beautiful thing that has happened, but we can take care of that part. And so, of course, they did. Of course. But some people in the church didn't see it that way. Okay. Bailey is a beautiful singer and plays organ. And she was deleted from the church for playing. She was told that she could only play until she started showing, and then that was going to be it. Now, I understand the church not wanting to be, quote, I guess, embarrassed, but she could have played up in a choir loft, and nobody necessarily had to see her, and, you know. And, by the way, the priest that asked her to sit down, listen to her confession at Divine Mercy. So it wasn't like you didn't know. Okay? So it's hard, because remember, sometimes other people make mistakes, and then you or your family members kind of pay for that. And that was a hard one. So some people, and there were a lot of people that approached us. We had a lot of support, don't get me wrong. But there were some people that approached us that I just leave the Catholic Church. Well, I'm not going to do that. First of all, if you ever experience, if you totally believe in the Eucharist and experience the Eucharist, you can't walk away from that. You can't walk away from Jesus. That's the most intimate thing you can ever have with Jesus, is how to receiving him. So it took a lot of time for her to heal with that, and she did. And by gum, she plays for weddings all over the place. And she does sing at that church. And to come full circle is we just did a ceremony, dedication ceremony for, we have a new grounds outside, and there's a statue of Mary and Bernadette. And so it was this whole big ceremony. Guess who got to sing a cappella the Ave Maria? And so she did. And that was so awesome. So it's come full circle. Now, that path for healing didn't come necessarily easy, but we stayed in our faith. We just went to different churches, different parishes. And we stayed together as a family. You know, we're married and have 3 beautiful kids now. Honor yourself. Beautiful. Beautiful kids. During my time as an adult, one of the hardest stories, but probably most rewarding story, was the story of my ex-brother-in-law. My sister lost her husband, and we just talked about this, in 2004. She had 6 kids. So several years later, she met someone else, and they got married. What a task to take on. What awesome. We thought the world of him. It was great. So he started helping raise the kids. Beautiful. Should be the end of a beautiful story. I read a book after I knew about this, and one of the adjectives or one of the characteristics that pedophiles have is they're very patient, and they will groom someone for years. So my sister's oldest daughter, unfortunately, was the victim of this. And I can remember the night I found out I am going to a show. DeMange just performed a little bit here now. And so I'm going to a show. I'm in backstage. So, and my sister calls and tells me, now it's a different sister. There's like I said, I'm one of 9. And she tells me the story of what happened. And I'm beside myself, because here's my niece that has been violated. And I'm thinking, what about the other ones? What's my sister going to do? You know, all these things are going through my mind. And I have to bury it for a little bit, because I got to go backstage and do a show. And I'm like, okay, I can do this for 2 hours. And then I'll come back out and I'll deal with all this then. And that's what I did. So we're out in the parking lot. Now we're unloading everything from the menu, putting it back in our cars to go home. And I have 2 girlfriends that are with me that help backstage. And I can't wait any longer. It's just ready to spew out of me. I got to tell somebody. Girlfriends are great for that. And so I tell them, you know, the story about what happened. And they look at me and I'm like, what are you going to do? And I stopped in my tracks. And I'll never forget it. And again, this is by the grace of God. I said, I'm going to forgive him. Not only am I going to forgive him, I'm going to pray for him every day of my existence that he goes to heaven. Because he married into my family. And I'll be darned if Satan's going to get this one. Satan's not going to win. That was years and years of practice before that. So, time went on. I'm going to guess it was within 2 years. I kind of get lost in the timing. But he passes away. So we all go to my sister's house. They were separated in the rings of divorce and everything at that point, all these grounds. And I'm coming home, and all I can think of is, I hope you made it. After all that you did, I hope that we won. And I remember coming home. Now, I've had a lot of little things like this happen to me, but it's midnight. And I'm like, I've got to go to work the next day, and I'm coming home, and in this farm, I can see this guy walking down his driveway, looking like he's going to get mail out of his mailbox. Who does that at midnight? Whatever. He's an older guy, so I'm like, maybe he's mixed up on times. So how you do, you go a little bit, you want to give him room in case he gets close to the mailbox, so I veer a little bit over and then come back in. Well, at that moment, I look in my rear mirror because I think I wanted to see, it's like, God, I'm still getting this mail. This is so crazy. Except for he isn't. He's in my back seat.
Not creepy.
And what you're thinking, what you said, is exactly, I scream, I do a little bit of a swerve, and I see right behind him, like he's sitting here, and right behind him, like right here, I see John. My ex-brother-in-law, sorry, didn't need to say his name, but I did. And I see him, now the words, thank you. And then they both disappear. That was probably one of the hardest things I had to do. But he did it. And I told him, we won. We won. We may have done despicable, horrible things, but we won. If it saved him from going to hell, we won. There are always going to be people out there that do things. There's another gentleman that I know. He's of the age. Once you get to a certain age, past 60, they lose. Employers tend to lose confidence that you can do your job anymore, or they're just really, you're high on the pay scale and they're just wanting you to retire. And it's a real thing. But this guy, again, sounded really similar to my situation. He got handed a paper, and I think he had 12, so he had even more things that he supposedly did than I did. And he was going to be put on probation. He looked through the whole thing. He says, well, I know I did the one, and the other one didn't return an email. And he goes, well, that's kind of subjective, because how do you know if you got the email, and maybe I just didn't see it, or maybe it got lost. And the rest had nothing to do with him and what he did. And finally, he looked at it and he said, what is this truly about? And the supervisor broke down and said, they're making me do this. Because they're trying to get rid of this top level. And he says, work with me. I'll promise you I'll retire within the year. Just let me step into it. But he was another person that came to me and says, I'm forgiving them. I'm forgiving them. I know what they're doing. It's not right. But I'm forgiving them. Now, I told you things that had happened to me, but, that goes both ways. Because there are things I've done to other people. I'm the oldest of 9 siblings, 9 kids. So I'm pretty sure I probably had the bossy, meanie, whatever things I did. I threw rotten eggs at my sister. That was a little bit enjoyable. But other than that, there was just a lot of stuff that I did as well. as I'm going and healing in my forgiveness of other people, I'm having to go back and think, okay, what makes you think that you didn't do things to other people? So I sat down one night and I wrote a letter to each one. I took me one night, but I wrote a letter to each one of my siblings asking forgiveness. If anything, I prayed first, anything I could think of that I did to them to ask them for forgiveness. I've had that talk with my mom in church. My mom's a beautiful person. But I've had that talk with my mom in church and said, Mom, I was a pain in the butt teenager. I'm sorry. And she says, I wasn't the perfect parent. I'm sorry too. And so we've had that conversation. Over and over with my dad. We were watching a video last night. We had our family Thanksgiving. And it was from 30 years ago. And in the video, somebody catches us. I must have said something to him, and he didn't like whatever I said. He didn't like it. And you could tell by the look on his face, and he walked away from me. And I looked at him and I went, I don't know what I said to you, but I'm sorry. Because I forgive you. I don't know what you said to me either. Neither one of us hung on to it. But it was one of those things. It's like, you've got to hold up for what you've done too. And sometimes you're that person that doesn't even realize you said and did something to somebody. Ask God to help you. I think now, in this day and age, I think one of Satan's biggest tactics, and obviously I've said unforgiveness, is to break up the family. So there have been several, I listen to podcasts all the time, and there have been several speakers on these podcasts that have said, spouses that have been married 30, 40 plus years, and they're finding them arguing about silly things. And most of it comes back to, if you can break up the family, then Satan has full reign. So I encourage those of you, and wherever your place in a family is, you're either a daughter, a sibling, a parent, sister, grandma, whatever your place, you've probably upset somebody sometime. Go back and ask that forgiveness. One of this, and this is a really insignificant story, but it's just true. I get partially ready in one bathroom, Ken gets ready in another bathroom, but after I partially get ready, I go out, finish getting ready in the living room because I like to watch the Mass on TV. But what I did do, he must have got the electric bill that week, because what he asked me to do, he said, can you turn the light off in your bathroom while you're watching TV? That way we don't have that light on. I'm like, yeah, I get that. And it made sense. No qualms. That wasn't even anything to have an argument about. But the ironic thing was, when I went back into our bedroom, he gets ready in the bathroom right off our bedroom. His light was on. So I found that just kind of humorous. And I took a picture and I said, no worries, honey, I got this. And I found it humorous. But he thought I was really, really upset with it. And that is just not us. We're funnier than that. We enjoy each other. And so that was the thing we had to have a conversation about. And I said, no, I really wasn't upset. I thought it was funny. He goes, oh, okay, I didn't take it that way. Perspective. And I bring this up because perspective can make a big difference. Now, I don't know if you can see this or not. These are two people looking at a number. One's going to see 9 every which way you can see it, and the other's going to see 6 every way you look at it. And you're not going to convince the other one of any different unless you walk over and look at it from their perspective. One of the best ways of helping you is confession. That I can honestly say, confession helped me the most. When I struggled, I'd go in, I'd say, it's been 1 month since my last confession, still struggling with the same thing, and I swear that I probably knew what it was by that time. And he's like, keep on praying for him. And just getting the blessing of confession helps you to forgive and helps you to heal. And one of the reasons I say to ask for forgiveness, remember our Father, it says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So it's right there. It's Jesus' prayer to us. Keep in mind, the different commandments, Eucharist. How many know about the miracle that happened in San Francisco? Yeah. Father Chris Ayler, first of all, I love Father Chris Ayler. Shout out to him. He does a lot of podcasts, and he likes to educate people. So I am one of those that I like training, I like education, and he calls it Go Back to Seminary. And so he was doing a teaching in San Francisco. Now, we would probably not think that as one of the holiest cities in the United States, right? We probably consider that as one of the not so holy states or cities. But he was finishing things up. He had gone back, if I remember right, to the sacristy, or back away, putting some of his stuff away. And he had the monstrance out with the Eucharist inside. And everyone saw Mary inside of that. So obviously it hasn't been approved yet. But go online and look at that. It's really amazing. And he talks about it, and he says, statue of Mary that had been 3 feet from the monstrance, if there was a reflection, or, all the scientific parts of it. But it's so exciting to see a miracle, or hear about a miracle that it is in the United States. Go to Mass. Go to Mass as often as you can. I've had people that have told me, God's bigger than that. I don't have to go to church all the time. He doesn't care if I'm there. Yeah, he does. What if he had the Last Supper? Keep in mind, the Last Supper was the first Mass, correct? Everybody knows that? What if this is what happened? Again, I don't know if you can see this, but this is Jesus at the Last Supper table, all by himself. I mean, so when I'm thinking about getting ready for Mass, and there are just some Sunday mornings, it just feels so good to sleep in. No, Jesus is inviting me for dinner. He's inviting me to his table. He has given up everything for me. And I need all the help I can get. Now, who in here wants to be a saint? Right. So the last time I heard a talk about unforgiveness, because again, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and unforgiveness is one of them that I listen to. Father Jim Blount says, well, if you want to be a real saint, those people that have hurt you and upset you? He said, now, and you're praying for them, because we've all gone to that level. We know we have to pray for them. He said, yeah, now pray for them to be a higher level in heaven than you are. Oh, really? But if you truly want to be a saint, that's what we need to do. Because that is true love and true giving. You're going to work so hard for Jesus that you want all those people to be saints and go to heaven as well. And not only do you want them to be saints, you want them to be better than you, higher than you. I'm going to end this with a unity candle, or unity prayer. Unity prayer. This prayer is one of those that hides you from the evil one. If you didn't get one, I have some more up here, so afterwards come up and get one. Okay. This prayer is a very powerful prayer. Father Jim Blount is an exorcism priest, and sometimes if he doesn't have the opportunity to go to the bishop and get permission beforehand, he would use this, because this is okay by the archbishop and by the church. And a lot of very powerful things have happened with just this prayer. So, okay? In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. My adorable Jesus, may our feet journey together. May our hands gather in unity. May our hearts beat in unison. May our souls be in harmony. May our thoughts be as one. May our ears listen to the silence together. May our glances proud on penetration of each other.
our lips praise your everlasting mercy and eternal Father.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.